Welcome back to the program. We are joined today by Professor David Betz from King's College in London to discuss the possibility of Western countries possibly moving toward civil war. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you. Very pleased to be here.
Well, my first thought, though, when I went over this topic was that it must be very difficult or awkward research focus for an academic, because whenever one addresses the issues of societal divisions, be it between elites and the public, or between ethnic or religious group, or between competing political identities, it creates tensions because it questions the entire liberal project that's been essentially remaking our societies over the past decades. So I can imagine it creates some frustration. I mean, in Europe, we often have this obsession with speech acts, as you know, that the assumption is that you create new social realities with words by, for example, normalizing it. So one can create then, by talking about civil war, expectation of violence, maybe incentivize people to prepare for conflict. And so it is an interesting dilemma. I was wondering if this has been an issue for you, that is, on one hand, arguing that this is a problem which should be addressed, but at the same time being told that if you do talk about this, then you can cause the problems you want to avoid. Has this been an issue for you?
Yes, it has. That's a very common problem. I would say it's actually the most typical reaction to the thesis that I've presented. It's for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. There is a very firm belief embedded in the Western consciousness, I would suggest, but certainly in the European consciousness, about the power of speech, essentially, to bring things into being. It's an idea that's been around for a long time, but it's achieved a kind of almost complete dominance within academia and in policy circles. Certainly in government. Governments behave very much as though they believe this, which is no doubt why they're so concerned to crack down on things. The irony is they ought to know, because Western society used to know that the way to deal with. First one is factionalism. So a factionalized society is one which is clearly prone to or is prone to civil conflict. We have now, throughout the Western world, highly factionalized societies. This is not really much disputed. I would add to it, however, that in fact, the form of factionalization, which we are now experiencing throughout the Western world, I'll speak specifically of the UK, but one could talk of other countries in this respect, is not just factionalism, but is a particular form of factionalism which is extremely toxic, and that is known as polar factionalism. Polar factionalism refers to a situation where people are no longer disagreeing with each other over matters of the day, things like abortion or death penalty, where reasonable people can have very, very strong views, but also still feel themselves to be compatriots with people who hold opinions on those things contrary to their own. Polar factionalism is a situation where people suppress their individual feelings about this or that policy in favor of what they think is the consensus view of their faction or tribe. And this is a situation which really only occurs when people are in fear of their security. When you feel insecure, then you look around for support for your allies. You naturally feel a need to have friends and allies around you, and that people tend and people tend to respond to that feeling by adopting what they think to be the consensus view of their tribe. This has a self-reinforcing dimension, as many things do in terms of the factors that I'll mention. Once they kick off as an idea, they tend to aggravate the underlying factional situation, as in people become increasingly factionalized, become increasingly tribalized. You get this acceleration of the gaps between groups and a heightening of the tensions between them, to use a bit of Marxist terminology. The second major factor is referred to in the Civil Wars literature in a rather sort of anodyne manner as downgrading. Downgrading is a situation where a dominant but declining majority faction within society, normally an ethnically defined faction, feels itself to be in a position where it is where it faces a permanent loss of its status. So in this case, you might they fear, for example, things like the loss of the primacy of their language as the lingua franca of that society, the loss of their cultural traditions, cultural ideals, their religious and cultural symbols, the things that are glorified in that society, that are treasured and so on, are being replaced and sometimes being actively destroyed, in fact, as a piece of active, as an active technique towards driving further division. So they fear they're losing status, their dominant status throughout that society in all kinds of ways, from the cultural through the economic, the legal, social, and so on.